Let the record reflect that the motion has been withdrawn. Miss Van Loan,
Good.
we're not ignoring you.
Oh, that's fine. I can come back after lunch.
No. There is no after lunch today.
So good morning again. It is that time of the year where we start talking about our annual budgets, and I'm very pleased and want to acknowledge the hard work of our various CAC groups. We had a lot of special call meetings for many of the CACs. They held multiple meetings starting back in May and June to get our budget set and approved and ready to come to you. And as we worked through that process, and as some of you started looking at the information we provided you with those draft budgets, we started getting some questions from you that we've been trying to address and answer. And as part of that, it sort of culminated in a conversation I had earlier this week with Chair Citro about the downtown and the planning budget. And when the cultural assets first started coming and asking for CRA assistance with their capital improvement projects, we had that sort of snowball effect of all of them. Again, we've talked about because of COVID and many of them looking at this is a good time, and they were planning for a lot of these improvements. And so now everyone's at that same place and advancing their facilities, improving their facilities, and creating a greater and more enjoyable visiting and entertainment experience for their visitors. So as we looked at this, we suddenly had $48.25 million in requests, and we've been scrambling over this past spring with you and with the CAC to look at how do we accommodate those requests. And in my conversations with the chair this week, one of the things that sort of came out was we were looking so much and so narrowly focused on the cultural assets as opposed to the full CRA, and looking at accommodating everyone, not just the cultural assets, but the future of downtown, especially in the next 4 years as we go into an updated strategic action plan and community redevelopment plan for downtown. So from my conversations with the chair about the other needs of downtown, affordable housing, the Army-Navy store that we just acquired last fall, and looking in this coming year to define a scope and go out for an RFP to get that developed into workforce and affordable housing, any associated transportation hubs or needs we might have with the infrastructure, green space surrounding that property. And then also we have an opportunity to buy more park space in northern downtown for the areas that are serving the residents who are living there or will live there in the near future, that isn't always right along the Riverwalk and isn't the glitzy parks, that we have those neighborhood parks for that growing residential population that we have on the north side of downtown and that we hope to grow. So what I did is go back and look at the numbers, and that's what I put on your desk. And now if you can bring up the TV, the monitor, I'd appreciate it. So one quick clarification. When you look at that line where I've got the yellow highlights where you see less revenue and fund balance at $11 million, and then as you go to the right, and it's also highlighted in 13, these are a running balance. So these would be the balances if no additional money was spent. So these are not at the end of each year, you would have this much each year automatically. It is cumulative. So in FY22 or FY23, if we spend on any additional projects, any part of that 11 or 13 million, the 13 million you see off on the right in 2025, that also goes down. So what this is telling you is that for those 4 fiscal years, FY22 through FY25, you only have $13 million, an estimated $13 million to spend across all 4 of those fiscal years. And again, the planning budget did not plan for any additional projects except for what was already on the books. So if we put money towards housing, either in acquiring another property to promote more affordable housing or workforce housing, or any money we put into the Army-Navy store, you can see at that next line that by 2025, there's very little money left over. So what I did over the past couple of days is the lower half to still fully fund the requests for all the cultural assets that have come and talked to us so far, and with the offer by both the STRAS and the Tampa Museum of Art that they were flexible in how they, the timing of when they get their funds. I did not extend it out beyond 2027. I had several people coming and asking me, you know, they were willing to extend it beyond that. They're willing to stretch it out as long as they know the money's coming. I did not take that approach. I just adjusted a couple of years so that we could reduce some of the early years when the CRA itself would have very limited funds, but add it back on to the end year when there are fewer requests being funded in FY 26 and 27. So we still have the $25 million from the STRAS. It would still be FY 23 through 27. We would still be looking at the $12.5 million for the Museum of Art, but we did go from 1 year to 3 years within that same time frame. But now, instead of having $13 million to spend between 22 and 25 for the CRA, we now at that bottom, you can see $25 million. So that could equate to $10 million for housing over the next 4 years, especially looking at that Army-Navy store and other opportunities. With our new SAP update in the next year or so, we would also then have money to move on those initiatives. You also have the Franklin Street Vision Plan that will be coming to you in the next month or two with several ideas and improvements for street scraping and pedestrian amenities within the Franklin corridor. And without this adjustment, we would have to pick and choose and say no to most of those requests. So what I am proposing for you today is that we look at adopting the payout schedule shown on the bottom of the page so that we can both fund our cultural assets and take advantage of all the momentum and everything they're working on and all their great plans, but at the same time still be able to operate as a CRA and still serve the residents of downtown, and especially again as we look towards the development of the rather neglected northern half of downtown.
If I may, CRA board members, I went to Ms. Van Loan after hearing about this opportunity for acquiring lands for affordable housing, workforce housing, no matter what you want to call it. I started looking at the picture of what it's going to look like there, what our downtown is going to look like, long after I'm off city council. And with the growth in downtown Tampa, we are going to have housing where the people that are making less than $25 an hour, less than $20 an hour, might be able to live. The people that are bartenders, the people that are restaurant employees, the people that are shoe shine, the people that are hairstylists, those type of people, so they don't have to spend the money on the gas, maintenance, upkeep, insurance of their automobiles to move from East Hillsborough County, drive from East Hillsborough down here. I think we have the opportunity to hold on to those lands and to suggest on how those lands will be developed for workforce affordable housing. Maybe even talk about parking minimums, so that lowers the cost. But I think our future is right here. And this is the reason why I went to Ms. Van Loan. And I'm hoping that Dr. Tamar and Ms. Judy Lisi will be able to get on board with this. Comments, questions, ideas, thoughts, dislikes? Councilman Dinkfelder.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Michelle, I think it looks fine to me. you know, I think that the institutions that we're trying to help have made it clear that they are flexible, and whether or not we front load it or make it level across, you know, across the whole thing, or rear load our assistance, as long as our assistance is firm and they can rely on it, then I think that's the most important part. So I for one, am comfortable with Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your leadership on it.
I thank you. Anyone else that would like to discuss this? This area, go ahead, Councilman Vieira.
So let me ask a question. I mean, are we going to be asked to be taking a vote on this, I assume, today?
Ms. Van Loan, is this going to be today or the 7th?
Well, if you are
excuse me,
all generally in agreement with it, we will incorporate it into the development agreement that we are developing, or that we are negotiating currently with the STRAS.
So that's going to take a motion today.
Preferred, yes, or general consensus. If we get the general idea that you are not okay with it, then we will try and do something else.
I mean,
Councilman Vieira.
and thank you. On the STRAS issue, I'm not opposed. I'm not for it. I have other questions. But I do think, again, because I don't want to slow something down because of inquiries on my part, I do think that there is a majority consensus on this board in favor of that. Is that correct?
I believe so. I know that I am. If we want to have a show of hands, we can do that, but I think we are.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify and help, at the end of the meeting, when you asked for motions, I was actually going to make a motion, but I can do it now, for staff to bring back the final agreement with the STRAS in the September meeting.
Yep.
And because it's my understanding that it's just about right, Mr. Massey and I'm sure Brian and others have been working hard on that, Michelle, et cetera, and I think we've been talking about it for a long time. If Michelle, like I say, wants to rear load the money, so everybody's more comfortable with that, I'm good with that. But I think it's time to go ahead and formalize that agreement. So.
And I'll second that, because then that'll give us time for questions and all that stuff. So if I may, I'll second.
Mr. Goods, Councilman Goods, please.
All right. So we're going to back in this, right, Ms. Bello?
Pardon me? So
We're going to back in this, right?
yes, well, yes, if it has been the pleasure of the CRA board over several different meetings between the term sheet and your consensus vote in June that you wanted to move forward with the funding of the cultural assets. So this is our best attempt and a little bit more thought out attempt to be able to meet the needs of the CRA itself and also meet the needs and the direction that the CRA would like to go as it relates to our cultural assets.
Councilman Moran, I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish.
I just want to make sure in that clause that we're getting our bang for our buck. That's my biggest concern with 25 million. I mean, I know it's a great cause we're trying to do when it jumped from 15 to 25, but I guess just have to be assured that the people know that this body, along with the CAC, that we are part of that. But we just not giving any money, and I'm up front with that this body.
Yes.
You know, we talking about the county. We can't count on the county, but they counting on our money right now for sure. For sure, they counting on this. So for me, I need to be assured in that agreement that what is our bang in the game, so people can know that this body, this city, did what we need to do to have a great cultural asset for people, and that the people can say we did that. Not just the STRAS, but the people, because it's the people's money. So I just want to make sure in this agreement that there's some things in there that's saying that what are they going to do as far as building this, anything, but I need to know we're going to get some bang for our buck.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Councilman
as your
Dingfelder.
STRAS representative, let me chime in a little bit on this. Number one is I think the STRAS folks are online if you want to hear from them today. I think they indicated they'd be available. Number two is, in regard to the actual document, as Mr. Vieira indicated, we could use, and we will use, the next 30 days to be able to scour that document in detail and, and ask staff questions in the interim to make sure that it meets your expectations, Councilman Goods, which I think are completely legitimate. I will say the CAC has massaged this over the last couple of months, and Michelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they ultimately voted unanimously, the downtown CAC, unanimously in support, after a lot of good questions, good Q&A. Michelle's been raking them over the coals in terms of what they're going to use the money for, and Morris to make sure that it's legally appropriate and appropriate under our CRA guidelines. So I think over the last, what feels like about a year now, we've been given this a really good massage, and I think that that we should, hopefully, be ready to move forward with the September vote. That's the intent of my motion.
Are you finished, Councilman Dingfelder?
Yes, sir.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at the whole picture here, and when you look at two things, cultural asset funding original, the sums of the digits for 5 years equals the total sums to be spent through the years 22 to 27. When you look at the cultural asset funding proposal, which is the same thing as the original, because funds that are from one area is the same funds they're going to pay for the other area, other that you're backloading on the cultural asset funding proposal, tells me there's doubt. Because you're starting off with a 2.5 figure and you're ending up with an 8.5 figure, and the year 2027 is going to be very, very critical for this city. That's the years that everything ends. There'll be no more CIT tax money. There'll be a lot of things different. So when I see this and I see what's coming, it looks like an apex with an explosion at the end of the apex. Because this apex, when it meets, when Florida Avenue meets Nebraska Avenue, the road becomes a little wider. And this, the way I'm looking at it, when this road hits 2027, the road seems a little narrower with a bunch of money to be paid. And I don't know if you're going to have that money that way. You're taking a risk, a big risk, when you stretch it out in the system and what you're doing, because it's telling me, or the way I think anyway, that there's some doubt somewhere about the funding. There's not?
No, sir. If you look at 2027, at both the original and the proposed, your bottom line revenue would still be at the 45 million. You're still spending the exact same. All that we're doing is, because there are multiple payouts happening during the early years from the CRA. So because there would be the Straz, there would be Union Station, there would be Jackson House, there would be the third cultural asset. A lot of those are all happening in those first few years. So all we're trying to do is reduce just some of that payout in the early years so that we can balance it. If you look at the total across all the cultural assets, it's just more balanced as you add them all up. It's only on the one that we reduced it a little bit at the front to pay it at the back, because the others would already have been paid off at those smaller amounts.
I saw that, and I just want to put it on the record. In fact, there's two of them where the payments are something plus 500,000, the beginning and at the end. And I see that, and I just wanted you to say it on the record, because that wasn't that clarity to the public that's viewing this, how the funding and the mechanisms would be. So now I understand. I knew it before, but I wanted you to say it on the record, because that was never explained to us before. Thank you very much for putting on the record. I really appreciate your answer.
Before we proceed, Councilman Dingfelder, please,
Yes,
just state that your motion is based on these figures that we have before us that Michelle Van Loan has given us.
Yeah, and specifically, I think we pointed to the bottom of that page, which is it identified separately? Let me see. Okay, so it's called cultural asset funding proposed as opposed to original. The original was a flat line, 5 million across the board with a 12.5 lump sum to the Museum of Art in 2024. This spreads it out differently, but still at the end of the day, it's the same 25 million over the 5 years for the Performing Arts Center, and the same 12.5 for the Museum of Art, just like I say, spread out differently and a little bit rear-loaded for the straws. So that would be my motion, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the clarification.
Sorry, what's the motion?
So motion is to bring it back in September, bring the straws agreement back in September, utilizing that formula that Michelle provided.
Okay, a motion has been made by Councilman Dingfelder, seconded by Councilman Miranda. Do we need a roll call? I would prefer a roll call vote, please.
And just for clarification, Bill, not only bring back the document, but bring it back for a vote.
Carlson,
Yes.
Goods,
Yes.
Miranda,
Charlie?
Vieira. Yes. Citro,
Yes.
Maniscalco. And Dingfelder.
Call Miranda again, please.
Yes.
And Dingfelder's yes.
Miranda
Yes.
and Dingfelder.
Yes,
Motion carried unanimously.
thank you.
CRA board members, when I had this conversation with Michelle and I had found out about the opportunity for these land acquisitions, all of you know that I championed for the old Army-Navy store to be bought to use specifically for workforce housing. This property may be very near that and/or abutting it. So the decisions we make today will be, in effect, 40 years from now. I'm hoping that this project, I'm hoping that these lands can be used in a proper way for those that, again, are on the lower socioeconomic scale that can't afford living downtown but work down here. So, gentlemen, I thank you very, very much for this vote, and thank you, Ms. Van Loan, for doing the hard legwork on this. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
So now if we'll move on to the FY22 planning budget with the PowerPoint. And I did provide all of you the actual recommended budgets from the respective CACs, so you have that. It was loaded into Sire, so if there's anyone listening online, you are able to access the actual budget pages, the proposed budget pages, at the clerk's office through the agenda for today by clicking on my presentation, and it will bring up that PDF of those 8 respective budgets. So overall, we saw, we are now at $45,255,000, a little over $6 million more than we did last year. Overall, we have a 14.8% increase in our revenues. Last year, we did have an 18%, and you do see that slowdown in Channel District in downtown, partially because of COVID during 2020, and also especially in your smaller districts like Channel District, you see the big bump up when we get a new building that comes online. In downtown, when we see a couple of new buildings, we will get that bigger bump in our revenues. But then when we are in between and in construction and we're waiting for those new buildings to come online, the growth in revenue is a little bit slower.
Bill.
We do have, for the first time, this is how our funds are allocated over the proposed budget, and this is the first time we are presenting to you a budget where the redevelopment investment of 43% in the big blue wedge is larger than our capital improvement project that you see in the purple. Normally, we are very heavy capital improvement projects, and in the past couple of years, there has been such a great focus on programs and assistance and more of the vertical improvements. You've been approving programs for West Tampa and for East Tampa for both housing and also assisting businesses with their growth, the improvements of the aging building, and supporting our historical structures. And that is reflected in this budget for FY22. Some of the notable changes, last year we started where we shifted more and more of the CRA staff to be funded 100% from the TIF to separate us from the general fund and any associated duties from the rest of the city. Again, our funding for programs surpassed our capital investments. We do have an increase in funding for our housing programs. The budget does include 3 new FTEs, the housing counselor and administrative assistant, and the communications, And even with 3 new FTEs, you'll notice that our administrative costs are still at only 4.6% of our entire budget. We also have the completion of the Channel District and East Tampa Strategic Action Plans coming up this fall, and we do anticipate 2 additional CACs, both with Valerie Farrell, one being Tampa Heights and the other one being downtown, to start initiating their plan updates also during FY22. Moving on to the individual CRAs. With downtown, again, the big focus is initiating their update of their SAP and community redevelopment plan. As Valerie talked about earlier, we are entering into that loan for the $32 million convention center expansion and improvements. And so that kicks off in FY22. We will see the final rehabilitation of Herman Massey Park, well waited for both these programs, and Kid Mason Community Center. The development of the Army-Navy store. And that property does have other properties around it that we would be looking at. And when you look at the grid alignment, the streets come through an angle through several of, between the CRA and the city, we own property, but the street grid is not straight. And so it makes it harder to develop those properties. So we will be looking to align that grid so that we can get more of a coherent development and get more development on there, along with very strategic green space for as amenities for those developments. And again, we continue with SPP as you see much of the infrastructure and now the landscaping and the amenities that are completing all of the underground work that was the first original phase. For those of you who were not on CRA board at that time, the beginning of this work was completely redoing all of the infrastructure underneath the street, the stormwater, the wastewater, and the water pipes that were not able to handle the size development that Water Street or anyone else who would have built high rises and higher density there. Our infrastructure was not capable of handling it. Our TIF revenue for downtown, we will be at $17,895. Again, it's a nice growth, but it's just leveling off a little after FY20. Here is their budget. Again, you have the more detailed pages. So we are showing you your remaining balances that for CRAs, our money does not expire the way it would for the general fund. And for us, that when we have capital improvements or we have a program, we can put $500,000 or $750,000 into a program, and that may fund it for a year or two, and that moves forward. So in this budget, you see several items that look like it's a fund balance, such as Kid Mason or Herman Massey, but those numbers will get close to zero by the time we get to the end of the year. And you'll see the allocation, again, for the last payment of the current loan for the convention center, and then the new loan that we're looking at that Valerie referenced, and then also our annual payment for the Master Infrastructure Agreement Program with SPP.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Dick Felder.
Thank you. Michelle, I sort of have a big picture policy question that I'd like to throw out to the board. And I know the witching hour is approaching of noon, and we're trying to get out before noon. But this is kind of an important question. I saw in 3 different budgets, including the channel side budget has $100,000. I'm not sure about downtown, and the Ybor budget has a $400,000 budget for policing. I think that's called community policing and that sort of thing. And it concerns me a little bit philosophically. Of course, we're all big supporters of TPD, and they have a huge part of our city budget. But I always thought that the purpose of the CRA was to take this additional TIF money and create enhancements over and above the typical city budget. And this is why I bring this up. And it's obviously we want policing, we want community policing, we want it every part of the city, and including all of these districts. But the question in my mind is, and I know we're starting small here, but small things become big things. It's sort of potentially a slippery slope. And so I just throw it out to council, if anybody else has any heartburn with not the policing part of it, but should the CRA be funding additional police in these areas? And I will note, we've had the environmental detective for many years in East Tampa, and I support that because that's a specialized unit. We've had code enforcement, additional code enforcement, I think, in Ybor City. And I'm in favor of that because that's a specialized activity, because Ybor City has unique issues. But when I see something like community policing, it just has me scratching my head that, is that the policy we want in place, and is that something we want to continue over with? Now, I'm not necessarily asking for everybody to decide. I'm just sort of throwing that out at you today without any warning. But it's something you might want to think about before we, have a final vote on the budget. What is that, next month, Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry, are you?
Is that next month?
I believe it is. Ms. Van Loan, it is next month, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So anyway, I don't know, does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Councilman Miranda.
I don't have heartburn, I'm just bald. But going along those lines, this is not new. You have very communities, neighborhood associations who pay for policing more than what we offer because they want better service. And that way, it's a balance of the whole city. So what's happening here, and I'm only making an assumption, that these, where you have community policing, means that sometimes you have a lot more activity than what you realized you wanted when you started. And when that happens, you got to draw police from the neighborhoods that they're there, from the district to come in, and you have very little in the neighborhood, if any at all. So they're taking the preponderance of the need of the city and using it for their area, therefore they got to pay for it. That's what I think. I may be wrong, I may not be 100% correct, but I make an assumption that that's what it is.
Except the only difference I would say, Charlie, is, and you're totally right, Parkland Estates, New Suburb Beautiful, these areas that are pretty wealthy, they pool together their private money and pay for the policing. Here, we are making a decision to use public money for this additional policing. And perhaps Councilman Goods, with his background in policing, might have the most insight on this, but I just wanted to point out that that's a slight difference.
Councilman Miranda.
The problem is, if you do not address it when it's happening, you have chaos in the city, you have a breakdown, and the health and safety and welfare of all citizens, because some people are acting irrational. That's what it's all about.
Thank you.
Councilman Goods.
The city has grown. You have a lot more people in this city, a lot more activities. And so when you have a area, let's take Ybor, you have a squad. Ybor does have one specialized squad that deals with some Ybor activities and the outside surroundings of Ybor. So when there is a call, shooting or murder, those units go to that call for that neighborhood. So then what happens is, and the prime example, some folks, my constituent Ybor, they call me, the police are pulled for other activities in the city because of civil unrest or what have you. Now, I can't have my events now because there's no police. There are no police, so I can't be able to have my function tonight because the police says there's zoning rules, we have to have police. So what the Ybor situation is, well, that dollar amount is, there are a lot more people in Ybor. You don't have enough officers to cover all of Ybor. So I guess somehow within the CRA it talks about policing and they found a way to curtail, to get those dollars. So now you have extra off-duty officers, which I think what has happened since you couldn't get off-duty officers to work, and nobody works bars anymore. So now we've given that money, I think is going to the city, and now the city is what we call making those officers work now. No different than Gasparilla. We used to get paid, everybody used to get paid extra duty for Gasparilla. That didn't happen anymore. When our hurricane, no, we're going to take that money to the budget. We're just going to make everybody change their hours to work. So this is kind of what's happened here. They can't get anybody to work. So, of course, the CEC said, well, we'll pay, so, still couldn't get back to work, so my understanding, you know, I hear from the guys all the time. Now hours have been changed and things have been changed around, so now they're making them work, and now they built some extra officers down there to work. So, I get where you're going, Mr. Dingfelder, but for what the issues you have in my district, in that area, you gotta have police down there. You got more people down there, and you know, when one guy gets into a scuffle, man, it takes sometimes, you know, 2 or 3 guys, maybe more, to subdue somebody to get things, or get the crowd dispersed or what have you. So I get the point you're making, but we don't have enough police in the city, you know. Again, when something happens, officers are pulled away. But if I'm paying for those guys are there to work, and they're not pulled, and again, that's a specialized situation you got going on.
Anything further? Councilman
Just,
Vieira.
and thank you. Just to add my thoughts quickly, and you know, and I think the point that Councilman Dingfelder is making isn't necessarily about police in as much as it's something that should be in the CRA budget. But you know, we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, haven't we talked about funding Tampa Fire through CRA dollars in the past, or am at least we've talked about it. I remember when Councilman Goods brought up East Tampa recreational activities for improvements in 2019. We prospectively initially funded some of that through CRA dollars, et cetera. But the larger issue is that in areas where there's growth, et cetera, there are certain needs that community exceptionally wants and is reflected through their CAC, through their priorities, through their dollars. And law enforcement can be one of them, including, as Councilman Goods has said, with certain events, et cetera. I don't know exactly what this goes to, but I wouldn't see any personal reason to oppose it. But it doesn't strike, it doesn't stick out to me, let's put it that way.
Ms. Van Loan, what's it going to? Ms. Van Loan, what's it going to?
So, yes, I can help a little bit to hopefully put Councilman Dingfelder's mind at ease. So we consider that a bucket. The bucket says community policing. So it's going to mean something different in each CRA. So because they've been looking at their security program and working with TPD and D3 in EBOR to look at a whole host of issues and a whole host of solutions, they know ahead of time that they have this list, but instead of putting all those little line items in a long budget, it's lumped as in the security. So just for that $400,000 for EBOR, they are looking and working with D3 to possibly bring the environmental detective into EBOR. So part of that would be if they move forward and work out an environmental detective. There are portable cameras, handheld ticketing printers for the police that are on the ground and out working the streets and walking the sidewalks as opposed to in their vehicles all the time. There is the additional weekend security that from the pilot that did come to you all back in December, that ran from December through the spring. Code enforcement, they're looking at doubling it. Right now we spend about $14,000 a year in code enforcement, and they're looking to increase that up to 28. Adding noise violation signs, no cruising signs. So this isn't just paying for police officers, it is paying for all of these different security items that they've been working on with the police. In Drew Park, when we've added enhanced community policing, it was because we paid for the overtime for the sting operations to go after some of the nuisance businesses that were causing some problems for the community. Downtown, they have been having issues with large groupings of bicycle riders that come through the garages and have also been destructive. And so downtown CAC has been looking at security issues from that perspective and wanted to put some money in the budget that if we needed to reach out to police and ask for additional services to address, as the councilman said, an issue right now, we now have the resources and the ability in that partnership to do that with TPD. And all of these would be coming to you as each one is worked forward.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a healthy discussion. I think Mr. Carlson's pretty good at this also. I think we just need to be alert to make sure that, that we stay focused and that we're using these monies for what they're intended for. But thank you, Council. To
just throw in my, having worked with YCDC, there was always the perception from outside of Ybor, and I'm sure we all heard it over and over again, I'm not going down to Ybor. Ybor's not safe. Ybor's been one of the safest neighborhoods in the city of Tampa for many, many years. What the YCD was always asking for was a police presence, so that people that go down to the Maid at Columbia, Casa Santa Stefano, go to the Copper Shaker, wherever, go to Bernini's, so those people felt safe. And that's the reason, in my opinion, why this has been asked for. Thank you, Ms. Van Loon. Please proceed.
So moving on to Channel District, again, here's some of the recently completed sections of Channel Side Drive, and we will be having equally nice landscaping and pedestrian-friendly amenities. The sidewalk is curving, it follows the flow like a stream of water would. Again, trying to focus on not being quite so auto-centric in a community that is becoming much more heavily residential. We're also looking at, as Valerie reports on every month, the design and construct of the remaining streetscape improvements. Again, their strategic action plan is finalizing and will come to you in the fall for final adoption. Looking at more park and green space, you just approved the $8 million so that we can go after two very nice properties for adding more green and park space. And again, the redevelopment of the aquarium parking lot in partnership with the port. Again, a little bit of a bump in Channel District, showing that, again, we don't have any new buildings coming online that came on for our revenue, but still seeing a healthy increase in our revenues. On the left is a list of all of those projects that are already started, already in design, and some are starting construction within the next 12 months. And so you see that heavily weighed in the budget under the infrastructure for the engineering, the management, and then the actual construction costs on their budget. Any questions about Channel District?
Any questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
Okay, for Tampa Heights Riverfront, they are focusing also on looking at updating their community redevelopment plan and their strategic action plan, and also continuing to participate in Soho Capital as they complete the infrastructure work in the Heights and marketing all of the new restaurants and the activities and the programming that has been happening at Armature Works, along with the new businesses and the new spaces that will be coming online. We had an incredible jump, again, reflecting the new construction that gets their certificate of occupancies and now is on the tax roll, and we expect that increase to continue each year. Again, but with only 1.5 million, we do pay 74% of our revenues to the developer to pay back for that infrastructure that they fronted the costs for. So all of these costs that we pay under that CDD are all based on a bond repayment that is for infrastructure only, and all the streets and the pipe work that they put in the roundabouts in making that development. Any questions for Tampa Heights?
Any questions? Seeing none, please proceed, Ms. Van Loon.
For Central Park, we do have the facade grant. They have funded it. They would like to, they'll be coming to you to officially adopt them into the facade grant program, specifically focused on the Nebraska corridor. As Valerie again mentioned, you do have the Shaw development. This would be phase one, showing it along the southeastern edge of the Central Park CRA. And as that comes through, we expect to see a lot more movement on Nebraska, as property owners either will be selling to new users or be wanting to update their buildings and looking for us for assistance to help support them to remain relevant within all of this new development. Again, so you're seeing their revenue going up, again, still a very small at the moment, since most of the development within the CRA to date has been the Tampa Housing Authority. And there you see their budget. So we have $114,000 for district improvements, the $50,000 for the facade, making up most of that $174,000. Any questions on Central Park?
Questions? Seeing none.
Going into Ybor, again, we have Ybor 1 and 2, which are two distinct CRAs. They finished their vision plan in 2020. It's a 5-year plan, and as Courtney talked about working with TPD and their security concerns, looking at how they expand more into the professional office development, attracting and becoming even more of a mixed use community, promoting it safe. Lately, that has been a big concern for the businesses, and making sure that it's not just the reality, but also the perception. And whenever you are so sensitive because your economy can ride on your reputation, as was mentioned earlier, making sure that you are always addressing those issues, addressing them quickly, and putting out the positive press to make sure that we keep it an attractive place in the eyes of the public. And lastly, as we've mentioned in past budgets, they have been saving up for that 7th Avenue Archway Light Project, and that now will see construction during FY22. Again, a nice increase in their budget. We're seeing healthy increases each year. And their full budget, so you see the district improvements, which are all the small things lumped into that one line item just to fit on a PowerPoint presentation, but those are all the things where they contribute to upgrades in the parking garages and making sure the restrooms and the tree grates. So all those little things that the CRA does to enhance and keep the Ybor corridors and 7th Avenue looking presentable for everyone is in there, as mentioned by Councilman Dingfelter, 400 for the TPD services, again, that full array and menu of services and acquisitions to go with that. Their standard pressure washing, the streetcar project that they give to every year, and at the bottom you see that last $400,000 to go towards the total project for the archway and streetscape. So that is Ybor 1. Ybor 2, they are looking, this is the part of Ybor that is much more residential, looking at the infill redevelopment, looking at, as they pay for the archway project, future revenues will be able to go towards potential housing programs like we're starting to see in the other CRAs, and they will be able to catch up once they complete this project. Again, nice growth. And there you see, with this one, it's a smaller district. It doesn't have all of the commercial properties paying into it, so it's less than $1 million. The district improvements, again, that's a lump sum of all those small projects the Corrine handles well. They were able to add a little bit more into their commercial facade grant, and again, that last $218,000 on top of the $1 million that they have been saving over the past few years to be able to create this project and carry it through this year. Any questions on Ybor?
Question? Please proceed.
East Tampa, we have a lot of new programs. East Tampa has been very busy since January. So your new budget includes a new residential deteriorated housing rebuild program. What this is for, we have our owner occupied rehab, but for those people that the house may just be too far gone and it won't qualify because the grant program itself will not be able to bring the house to a safe condition, we are having a program that will actually rebuild houses in those instances. Again, income qualified. Affordable housing new construction, where we actually not only look at what we do with our existing housing stock, but trying to balance some of the outside builders that we're seeing coming in, and the natural progression as East Tampa is now being recognized by the private market as the next place to get affordable land, but we are seeing housing construction rise. So we would like to start acquiring lands through demolition, lands that we can get or as sheeted or in partnership with the city, whereby we can fund affordable housing new construction. RFP for infill housing, we do have several CRA-owned residential lots that we are, the CAC, excuse me, is currently looking at an RFP to go out to get that for infill housing. Economic development initiatives, which will be developed and defined over the coming year. Strategic residential and commercial property acquisition, a big focus right now. While property is available, how do we go after strategic areas, not just whatever we can get, but looking at priority corridors and where can we make the most impact by redeveloping a certain property or a certain section of a property, and also investing in our youth. So we again continue with our facade grant, our neighborhood improvement programs, our tree trimming program, safety project, projects, and then, as was discussed earlier, the artwork for the roundabout, and then the landscaping for the roundabout. Just to clarify, the artwork will sit on a concrete pad, a foundation, and we cannot design the landscaping around that until we know the size. So as soon as that contract moves forward and the artwork has a design, we will know the size of the pad and then be able to design the appropriate landscaping around that. So again, a very nice. East Tampa was one of the highest increasing and saw the greatest growth in our revenue for FY22. And again, you see many of those projects and programs. The youth development, again, tied to community improvement projects so that we can help invest in our kids and also have them participate in the improvements and the future of our community, our standard clean team and the environmental detective. Due to space, you see the $3.5 million for affordable housing. That is $1.5 million for the rebuild program and $2 million for the new construction for affordable housing. The East Tampa did ask for funds to be able to hire consultants for urban planning and strategic initiatives to help us carry out and implement our strategic action plan after it's adopted this fall. And so that money is for those consultant services. Land assemblage, you see we have about 1.2 million now, and adding almost 900,000 to that to be able to acquire those residential and commercial properties. And at the end, the balance of our neighborhood improvement funds. Any questions on East Tampa?
Councilman Goode.
Yes, ma'am. We'll stay on the screen first. We'll stay on the screen first. I'm not understanding what do we need an urban planner for now. You're telling me a developer, contractor person, but an urban planner, what is that person going to do? I mean, we're talking about development now. And
Yes.
That urban planner is not the same as a development person, so I want to make sure.
It's just a category. It's just a title. We're not looking at it like a classification of a city. So someone that, if we are looking to buy property, as we talked about before, if we bought property on North 29th Street, larger properties, what could they be used for? How could they be developed? What could we put there? What makes sense? And helping to advise us on what the best path forward is when we do have opportunities to develop and acquire land, just to be more strategic and have it as a resource. It wouldn't be a full-time. It would be as needed based on projects or initiatives that we were working on.
All right, go back to that screen again, IT. Looking for the housing.
Can you bring back up the PowerPoint?
Yeah. Two screens back.
Go back.
Yes.
Okay.
There you go. The programs. This rebuild program. Tell me more in depth on that, because I'm when you were talking, I'm trying to figure out where we're going with that. We talking about this occupied rehab, or we talking about dollars to be able to go out to be able to take care of these quick fix problems that some of these seniors may be having?
For which one?
Your residential deteriorated housing rebuild
Deteriorated
program?
housing, that would be, so when you have someone who, it would normally be applying for your owner occupied, if the house is too far gone and the grants alone are not enough to bring the house up to a safe standard, they just don't qualify and nothing happens, and then they're left with a house that is still unsafe and they still don't have the means to address those issues. So what this would do, and it is, right now we get the idea from what the county's doing. The county, when they put out their owner-occupied rehab program, they added funds that for those homes, for, again, income-qualified residents whose house is just too far gone to be safe or to be made safe, that there could be a program that rebuilds that house for them.
Okay, when you say the income, what is the income? Because that's where a lot of our challenges are. What are we saying with the income?
Right now, that hasn't been defined yet.
Hasn't
So
been
we'd be
defined.
working, these are the programs that they plan on working in the next year to develop.
I think that may be fine, but I still have a problem to where we still aren't helping the folks I believe we need to help. And what I mean by that, we have folks that have interior problems, roofing, how are we, what are we gonna design? Because that's what people are calling, asking me. What are we gonna design to help those folks? Because I don't want a program that has tons of paperwork. I want to have a program that people can apply and we can visually see, take photos and see, they have an issue, Ms. Jones has an AC problem. It may be a duct problem. That's what some of the programs we need to be looking at with some of the CRA money as well. So we're going to be looking to define some other strategic programs to streamline those particular people that
Yes.
really need it.
Yes, sir. That issue, when you brought that up to us, the budget had already been adopted, but that has been, it was talked about at the CAC at the last meeting or the meeting before. We've had several meetings this past month. And it will go to the Housing Committee, Subcommittee, to look at that and start defining that and working on that so that we can help with the small grants as well as the larger grants. And there's money in the existing funds that we can reprogram for other programs as they're developed. So this is not the end all, it's not limited to just what's on this.
And I know we've talked, but I get all these calls and people think that I'm not doing my job. So I have to make sure they understand it. We've had these communications so they understand what we're planning on doing for the future to get these simple programs out. No different than Mr. Ninos has a alley program. Up a month, they're already cleaning lots. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I want to see, to where you can have a simple procurement that these folks who are simple, everyday minority electricians, plumbers, whatever, simple programs to be able to get those dollars, apply. You got a list of folks, minorities, whatever, because now there are minorities that may be in those fields. If not, we can get them signed up. But now we have some avenues, and now people can put people to work, and now we're really working the CRA dollars. That's what I'm really looking to do.
And there's kind of a crossover in what you did. We can easily do just as easily as West Tampa for the alley cleanups. The programs that West Tampa has been looking at and has been brought to you, it is incumbent on the property owner to get their own contractors and vendors to do the work, and we reimburse them. With East Tampa, our programs have been designed that we are also trying to use this to also help our minority vendors, where we're now involved with getting them, and we're more actively involved as opposed to leaving it strictly as a reimbursement grant, so that we pay for it directly to vendors. We're in the process and involved of getting the vendors, vetting the vendors that we can then put out to these, similar to the way the HCD. So if you want programs that are leave everything up to the homeowner and we strictly act as a bank, those we can get out much faster. It's a much easier program, but the homeowner will do most of the work then.
So, I look at some of my seniors who don't understand that stuff, and I don't want them to be ripped off by somebody. So I have to look out for them as well. So we can do both, but I just want to make sure we have something in place to be able to make and beautify these streets. That's my biggest concern. When you deal with, I also looked at the budget with the housing person. That's under your budget, correct?
Yes, sir.
So who is that person going to answer to? Are they answering to you, or are they answering to Abby and Carol? Because I'm going to have a problem if we're going to put our dollars and they're answering to Carol and Abby.
They will sit in East Tampa, they will report to Cedric, and they will be an employee of the Community Redevelopment Department. In a crossover capacity, being trained by HCD to help process HCD applications within their programs, they will have that cross-training, they will have that interaction with them, and Kayon or whoever the new manager will be in HCD will need to make sure that they do know how to process and are accountable and doing it correctly. But as far as the workload and how they're working and the assignments, that would all come out of the East Tampa office, yes.
But I want that understood in a policy or a written policy that person, if the CAC is paying out of your budget, that person should be answering to you and Mr. McCray. And they should be doing that workload of East Tampa and not other city work. Cross-training is fine because that's great. But I don't want their workload becomes the city workload.
No.
So I want to make sure that's clear so the public can, because I got calls about that as well, that person, and we need to get that in writing so everyone understands That person is assigned to you and Mr. McCray for East Tampa, and they're working for the folks in East Tampa housing to get those housing initiatives out there, cross-training together, because I don't have an issue with that, because some programs they might need to know and do certain things. But I want to make sure that that person is responsible by you and Mr. McCray.
The same way, and it will be the same way that our environmental detective only works for us and the clean team and that equipment, any equipment we buy, everything we do with them, it is all within the East Tampa CRA boundary, yes. And they would be handled the exact same way.
Okay? That concludes it. Thank you.
Ms. Van Loan, before we go any further, we have the rest of your report, then we have 5 other agenda items. I doubt that we will be finished. We will be stopping at 12:30 and returning back at 1:45. Ms. Van Loan, please continue.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I have a 12:45 that I have to leave to right now, so just.
We'll be leaving at 12:30
I know,
regardless.
I bet it's about a 20-minute drive, so I gotta, I gotta leave 5 minutes early, in other words.
I understand.
Okay, so moving on from East Tampa, Westview Park. They have the land that they bought several years ago. They went through their strategic action planning process, and they are now looking for partners to develop that property into workforce and affordable housing. They're going to continue their economic opportunities, job creation, and also improving the appearance. A couple of years ago, we did Tampa Bay Boulevard that you see in that bottom picture, and now they want to do phase 2 to enhance it and to more of, as Councilman Dinkfelter referenced, more of a prettier, not a passive green space, but a truly lovely gardens and green space for the residential community to the north of there. Again, a healthy revenue growth. So there you see their district maintenance for some of the issues in Drew Park. Again, getting the fact that we also help pay for what we have built, whether it's Lois or Grady or Tampa Bay Boulevard, some of the cleanups that we've talked about in the other CRAs, affordable housing. We have $100,000 from each 2 years and a residential improvement grant. So we are now seeing $325,000 coming out of Drew Park towards the residential quadrant of Drew Park, and that neighborhood infrastructure dollars, which would be going towards the Tampa Bay and land acquisition for potential pocket parks. Sorry, any questions about Drew Park?
Any questions? Please proceed.
And our last one is West Tampa. They have been working on, they have a phase 2 of their Tampa overlay code. They continue with their facade grant and event sponsorships. And then also the many grants that Jesus has been bringing to you over the past several months, and I believe there's 2 more coming to you in the next month or 2. We also have the Tampa Housing Authority, which is continuing their West River, the construction of the east-west green spine going through West Tampa, and then also finalizing the Cypress Street outfall, and Somi Bakery right there shown of one of the new businesses we had last year. Definitely, if you haven't tried the bread, I highly recommend it. Again, we are seeing the reflection in the revenue of the growth we see in West Tampa and the redevelopment in West Tampa and their programs. So there's $40,000 for our overlay, district maintenance. Jesus talked about the alley cleaning that we're doing, special events and special projects. So that's 2, some of his special events, and also the neighborhood amenity grant is lumped in there. We did add residential rental rehabilitation. From last year, we have the down payment assistance program. Jesus has brought you the business enhancements micro grant, which is sort of what Councilman Dingfelder's been talking about is, and if someone doesn't need 30, 40, 50,000 a facade grant, they can do these mini grants with a lot less paperwork, and it can be processed a lot quicker. Our standard facade grant, again, our affordable housing initiatives that were funded last year, but the programs themselves are being developed this year. And at the bottom, our infrastructure as we look forward to the Main Street corridor and some of the other projects. We just received the final corridor study from Randy Goers and his group. So we're now looking at our next step as the appropriate infrastructure improvements that the CRA wants to pursue for West Tampa. Any questions on West Tampa?
Any questions? No, ma'am.
Okay, so following up on the 2019 motion by Councilman Carlson and Councilman Goods, asked about how much are we spending on affordable housing in each year budget and what would 30% look like. So for this, I show you what each of their total budget is, what would 30% of the gross be, and how much each one is spending. And then if you look at what their budget is, less commitments. What the less commitments is, I did not subtract salaries or any of those. These are contractual commitments. So for downtown, the 17 million goes down to 4 million because we spend 5 million or 4 million and change on one TCC grant, 4 million change on another TCC grant, and 5 million for SPP. And so that quickly reduces what the available dollars would be. We don't have a total cost of what we'll be funding because we're still determining what those costs will be. I do assume they will be well within the $5 million in FY22 as we develop that site and that northwest corner of downtown. You can see that East Tampa, with all the new housing programs, and I've been counting what we funded last year, we are well above the 30%. West Tampa has 300,000, but with the programs that we funded last year, we're just shy of $1 million in West Tampa. Drew Park, again, as you saw, put the 100,000 with the two programs they funded last year, plus the land that they spent over $500,000 on several years ago. So that land adds a value to that. And for the others, what I've given you, I won't go through all of this, but so you have it, here are the constraints on the other CRAs and why it may not make sense, again, for some of these CRAs to try and reach a 30% goal for housing, whether it's because they don't have that need, they don't have a large housing population, or there are budget constraints such as Tampa Heights, where 74% of the budget is committed to that developer bond. So you have this information there with you in your PowerPoint. And as everyone mentioned, on September 9th, in 3 weeks, we will come back to you with the final budget book and the service agreement for your approval for the FY22 budget.
Councilman Goose.
Ms. Van Loon, go back to the housing, 30%.
Okay.
All right. Make sure I'm calculating this right. So East Tampa budgeted for almost $6 million. And with the 30% of it, it's almost 2, but a leftover amount of about 3, correct?
Yes, so the two new programs that were put on were $3.5 million, and that would be in addition to everything that was funded last year. So that's just what's in the FY22 budget.
So we still got almost $3 million to play with.
You got plenty of housing money in East
Okay,
Tampa.
all right, that answers my question. So do some reallocation, that's it. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Van Loon.
In 7 minutes, I can get through the agenda. So item number 8, this is we come to every year, the East Tampa CAC. The CAC members get chosen through an election of the partnership. That election is September 14th. As Cedric told you, there will be morning and evening voting happening at Reagan Center. So every year we bring you the slate of candidates. There was a memo, we presented you a slate of 28 candidates. There was one gentleman who lives right on the CRA border in the southeast corner of East Tampa. The ad hoc nominating committee thought that he lived across the street from the border, outside of the border, and did not include him in the report. When we dug down more deeply, his address is actually in the CRA, and so you saw that Mr. Holly, we're requesting that Mr. Holly be included in the slate of candidates to make the slate of candidates 29. And you do have the applicants for everyone on the list of 29 and the 9 that were deemed ineligible to be a CAC member, or at least run for a CAC member, because they either did not live or work or have not previously been participating in the East Tampa community.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record reflect that the motion passes.
Item number 9 is an ex officio appointment. We appreciate D. Jackson's participation since the inception of the West Tampa CRA, and he will now be replaced by Mr. Haim Basden as the ex officio representative.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Let the record reflect the motion passes.
Item number 10, we had sent a memo requesting that that be continued to the 9/9 agenda.
So moved.
Thank you.
Okay.
We already did the continuance.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Councilman Maniscalco?
We already did the continuance.
We already did that.
Yes, that
Yeah,
was the
but-
first
Yeah.
action.
So item number 11 is the 8 million reprogramming for the purchase of the 2 properties in Channel District to create and expand our green space.
That's item number 11, correct?
Yeah, number 11, yes.
Yes, we have a motion made by Councilman Dinkfelder, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Let the record reflect the motion passes.
Item number 12 is reprogramming for East Tampa. Last month, you approved the owner-occupied rehab, and the $700,000 is the reprogramming to fund that housing program.
When is that gonna go into effect and how soon is that gonna be, programmed?
Cedric is finalizing and working on the RFP, so we'll get the RFP out, go through the review process, so in the fall, late fall.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilman Maniscalco, by Councilman Goose, Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record reflect the motion passes.
Our last item is again a reprogramming for East Tampa. This is $200,000 for the tree trimming program. This is just to help fund the people that have already been quoted, as we went through the money already that had already been originally allocated. So this gets us to the end of the year.
So move.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed?
No.
Let the record reflect the motion passes.
Ms. Van Loan,
Yes, sir.
okay, you know that everybody in the city is talking about this program.
Yes, sir.
So you know you're gonna have to re-up again with some money on this.
We have money that we can reprogram.
Everyone's
Yes.
talking about it, and honestly, the administration's going to look at possibly adding more forestry guys to that forestry division. Trees are falling out all over the city and the properties. And so, you know, people are like, East Tampa's got it, you know, and people are getting angry. And it's kind of a good thing that we finally got a good project really working for the people, you know? And the people are asking all over the city. So I hope the administration listen, that forestry division only has 1 crew for the whole city. So we've got that rescue money. So we may have to look at doing some stuff, you know, so that'd be maybe a conversation with the administration, but thank you.
Mr. Knox will be happy at that. All right, is there anything else, Ms. Van Loan?
No, with that, thank you, sirs, and staff has nothing else.
Thank you very much for your hard work today, Ms. Van Loan. All right, information reports and new business. Councilman Maniscalco?
Nothing, sir.
Councilman Carlson?
Nothing, sir.
Councilman Dinkfelder?
All good, thank you.
Councilman Goose?
Nothing, sir.
I don't want to spoil a perfect record. Nothing, sir.
Then I'm not going to say anything except thank you very much, council members, for your work today. I do appreciate it. We did a lot, and I thank you very much. Yes?
Nothing from me, Mr. Chair.
Move to receive and file.
Move to receive and file.
Second, third.
Motion made to receive and file by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor?
Aye. 1 aye.
And all opposed? Let the record reflect that it has passed. I thank you all again. I'll see you all at 5:01.